In this lecture, we're going to tune the suspension. And the first problem with the way we have the suspension set up now is that there's no preload. Almost every car on the road has preload in the suspension, in the spring. And that is basically that the spring doesn't start out unstretched when it's sitting at ride height. It's actually already has some load on it. And there's no real direct way to do that in Blender. So we're going to have to add what I call a preload motor. So I'm going to turn on the rig, and we have our trailing arm constraint here. Let me turn off the modeled parts. So we have our trailing arm constraint, which has our spring rate. But really, our spring rate's a little too stiff, probably. So if we hit play, it's a little too stiff. But if we lower it, make it like 2000, then the vehicle is going to sit too low, like that. So basically, we have a way to adjust the spring rate, but we don't have a way to adjust the ride height. So that's what we're going to do with a preload motor. So I'm going to come in here and select the trailing arm constraint right here. And I'm going to copy it. So I'm going to say Shift D, and then I'm going to move it along the X. And we're going to rename it and call this preload motor. All right. All right, for the preload motor, it's not going to be a generic spring. It's going to be a motor, and it's going to be an angular motor. And the target velocity just needs to be something kind of arbitrarily high. We're going to make it 1,000. And the max impulse is going to be the amount of force or torque we want to create the ride height we want. And I'm just going to set this at 1,000 for now. All right, let me pick our controller. I'm going to cycle that on and off, set the steering to 0, and set the braking to 100. So we can just see where we are at this point. All right. So I have everything on so I can see what the ride height is. I might come into a side view, and I have my preload motor selected. So let's press play. And the preload might be a little high here. Let's pick our preload motor, and let's just lower this down some. So it's sitting maybe a little too high. I'm going to lower this down. You can see it lowering it, so maybe about to 930. That looks pretty good. And I think I might lower the damping on the preload. On the trailing arm constraint. I'm just going to make it 100. Save it, reset everything, make sure it's reset, and see what happens. All right, that might be too bouncy. So let's up that back quite a bit. I'm going to make it 500 maybe. All right, Control S. All right, that looks a little better. Maybe a little lower. All right, that looks pretty good. The other problem we have is that our limits are a little too high. So you can see the wheel or the tire going through the fender. And we need to adjust that with our trailing arm constraint also. So right now it's negative 45. Let's reduce that down to negative 10, maybe 10. Press play, and that actually looks a lot better. Actually, it's still going through a little bit right there. So maybe we'll just bring it down to 8. So negative 8 and 8. All right, press play, and that looks a lot better. Now let's just try it out some. So I'm going to turn off the rig, and we're in our camera view. Let me pick the controller, reset everything, set brake to 0, and let's just try it out. Let me save it first, and press play. And let's see how it handles these bumps. I think that looks pretty good. It might be a little soft, but actually I think it looks pretty good.